everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Deborah Snyder. Deb is with Synergetic Press. We've been chatting for years now. First met Deborah at the 2019, like February 2019, Arizona Psychedelic Conference. They were a kind of vendor, booth person there, booth company there. And I was familiar with them from before because they had a lot of press around the ESPD 50, the book that Dennis McKenna and a number of others got behind. It was this large compendium of kind of papers around all known psychoactive plants in the world. And ethnopharmacographical search for psychoactive plants, I think something along those lines. And it was like the 50th anniversary. It was a big deal. Anyway, big fan of Synergetic Press, big fan of everything Deb does over there. It's like a really cool organization. And yeah, just glad to have any kind of relationship with them. They do a lot of really cool eco work, stuff with Mark Plotkin, Vinanda Shiva, who's like an amazing ecological and kind of farm rights activist, kind of, the anti-Monsanto crowd. But, for good reason. Like, I'm not critiquing Monsanto just because of who they are. It's just, there's models that are better. And Synergetic Press points towards that often, and does a good amount of psychedelic work too. Zigzag Zen and many other psychedelic books like Mike Crowley's Secret Drugs of Buddhism and much more. Anyway, just really stoked to have a relationship with Synergetic Press. And yeah, I can't wait to do more with Synergetic Press over the years. So thank you, Deb, for coming on, and can't wait to chat more. Can't wait for COVID to be over so I can come hang out at your ranch. And just looking forward to more collaboration. And I hope y'all enjoy this episode with Deborah Snyder of Synergetic Press. And if you want to support us, share this episode or your favorite episode with some friends. Or you can come leave us a review at Facebook or iTunes or your podcast app of choice. We also have a place where you can leave small monthly donations, patreon.com/psychedelics today. There is a private patron-only Discord channel in there. We're trying to figure out the right path forward there. So yeah, come hang out. And if you're interested in developing your professional, education around psychedelics, come check out our Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists program. It is a CE-approved class in the live edition, and it is amazing. It's the funnest thing I get to do all year is teach this class. More fun than even putting together a podcast, if you can imagine it. And it is just great to help people go through and set up a really firm foundation for their future with psychedelics, from theory and practice to harm reduction, clinical applications, and much more. And, especially like what's available right now legally in the US and elsewhere. And, lots of nuanced ethical discussion and much more. So I think that's it for now. Check that out at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And I think that's it. We'll see you all on the other side. I hope you enjoy this episode with Deb Snyder. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. It is November 9th, 2020. I am joined by Deborah Snyder. Hello, Deborah. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there.
Hey, so we got the chance to meet in early 2019 at the Arizona Psychedelic Conference. And
That's right.
Yeah, I was watching your table, kind of being a fanboy, because I love what Synergetic Press does. And I'm really just like excited by the concept of your group.
Well, we really appreciate you being such a great fan. I still have my t-shirt.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So, are you the CEO of the group, or what's your title over there?
I'm the publisher and CEO of Synergetic Press.
Great. Yeah. So just amazing books, stuff on like the Biodome Project, Biosphere stuff, like Secret Drugs of Buddhism, Changing Our Mind by Don Lattin. Maybe that's how we got in touch first. That was kind of a while back, before the Pollen book even.
Yes, when you were still very young.
Yeah, I love that the this book came out before the Pollen book and kind of got ahead of his title. So the Don Lattin one is Changing Our Minds. And I don't even know the name of the pollen book anymore. How to Change Your Mind, maybe?
How to Change Your Mind. Yes, it was interesting how they both landed, independently on something quite so similar.
Mm,
And they were both very important books,
totally.
breaking through to really show the broad reach of psychedelic medicine and use for spiritual growth, get a planetary perspective. We were very happy to be there at that when that door opened.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of rewind a little bit and talk about how you maybe kind of started entering this psychedelic and ecological space with Synergetic Press, or like what happened before that, maybe for you.
Well, we'll rewind back to the early 80s when I came upon a group of people. I was living in southern France and studying organic agriculture, and ended up traveling througroAix-en-Provence and met a group called the Institute of Ecotechnics that held
Mm,
one of the annual conferences, and I believe it was on the solar system that year. I ended up managing the farm there for about a year and participating in one of these conferences, international interdisciplinary conference on the subject of the solar system. So we had artists, we had Buckminster Fuller, we
cool.
had Kraft Erica, we had Thor Heyerdahl before that, William Burroughs. The Planet Earth was the conference before, which is actually a bit of a legendary conference. One of the early publications of Synergetic Press was the Planet Earth Conference
Mm,
book, which we're actually looking at another rendition of, which is quite prescient today. I mean, back in 1980, a bunch of scientists and artists and explorers talking about the future of the planet. And here we are today looking at many of the consequences that were, really foreseen. And also the major directive that came from Dr. Richard Evans Schultes, who was a speaker at the earlier conference on the jungles in 1979, to really make an effort to conserve the lore of the Amazon, the ethnobotanical lore, the plant knowledge, and the wisdom that was in threat of extinction. This is back in 1979. He was speaking about this. So it was through that connection that I met these great leaders in these fields, including Richard Evans Schultes, who I ended up publishing the Where the Gods Reign, Plants and Peoples of the Colombian Amazonia
mm.
back in 1986. And it was the first work of contemporary ethnobotany, really a guidebook in his photographs and descriptive text about all the variety of plants that he felt were the most important, having spent decades living and working with people in the Colombian Amazonia.
Yeah, for people who don't know who he is, how do you like to say who Schultes is?
He's the founding father of, he's considered the grandfather of contemporary ethnobotany by some. He is
Mm,
he is a professor, Wade Davis, Mark Plotkin, Michael Ballack, three of his more prominent students who went on to become famous ethnobotanists in their own right. And founders of economic botany and leading major foundations in cultural preservation of exactly this. Richard M. Schultes was venerated in Colombia. I think it's over 1 million hectares of national park forest preserves have
mm,
been put in Colombia. In the areas that he worked, he was in the footsteps of Bates, Humboldt, and Spruce for one of the longest for living for uninterrupted period of time in the jungle from in the 40s and 50s, 14 years.
mm. That's
He
amazing.
taught at Harvard. In the end, he went to become the professor at Harvard of ethnobotany to teach these young men. He became a legend.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's been films made about him, books about him.
Yeah, an Embrace of the Serpent, if anybody saw that, he's profiled in there with Theodor Koch-Grunberg, who was the German ethnobotanist that, before him, about 50 years before Schultes.
Mm. Is there evidence that sorry, I can't do the German name. Is there evidence that he found ayahuasca or like rumors of ayahuasca in the Amazon?
Theodor Koch
Yes.
Grunberg,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, he was there. he was there more at the height of when super missionary efforts were going on. It's a rather
Yikes.
dark period of time. I highly recommend Embrace of the Serpent if you haven't seen it, to understand what it was like for over about a 75-year period of time of exploration, early exploration, in looking for Yahweh, and to looking for these sacred plants for their medicinal value. And Schultes was a rubber expert. So the military had him there because he was organizing the rubber during World War II. He was organized the rubber production from Colombia during that war effort when rubber suddenly became difficult to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is, it's a very complicated topic too. It's like, thank God the Nazis didn't win, yes. But yikes about the colonialism.
Oh, I know. We have a diary of a rubber cutter at the turn of the century in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
That is called White Gold, which is actually in another printing is coming out shortly. And there's a potential for a film documentary based on that period of time, which is little known about, but it was a very dark period of time there.
Awesome. So was it from this event that you kind of... So I don't know how to totally phrase this. So Dennis McKenna told a story a while ago about how you in your group kind of were, I don't want to say something like the Society for Creative Anachronism, because your work seems to be more meaningful in that it was like kind of big public events to kind of raise awareness on ecological issues like that. What was the name of the ship, for instance?
The Heraclitus.
Right.
During that, so 79, 80, 81, 82, Schultes, basically the Heraclitus, which was the Institute's research ship that they had built, an 82-foot ferro-cement Chinese junk built in Oakland, California in 1975, that, they managed to figure out how to sail it all the way down to the Amazon, because Schultes in 1979 said, what John Allen stood up and said, what can we do about the disappearing lore of the Amazon? And he's one of the founders of the Institute, and Schultes pointed to the Heraclitus that was moored out there offshore, because the conference was in Malaysia, in Penang, Malaysia. And so take that ship to the Amazon and go and study the ethnobotany of the people there. And so they launched a 2-year expedition to the Amazon, and indeed the Heraclitus went up the Amazon, and it's where Wade Davis, Dennis, and others had participated in some very early ethnobotanical work. And so that, I came into this in 1981, 82. And so on the heels of this activity, and so when Schultes came to me with his book that he wanted me to publish exactly as he had presented it, and not like the New York publishers who wanted only his autobiography. So I said yes. And it set me on a whole path of publishing books on ethnobotany that I have not left. I have embraced. And, we are continuing to, with the idea that ethnobotany is a growing discipline of study and research. And that's what got me in.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And how soon, well, what was your involvement like? Were you jumping on the boat, like doing events all over, or what did that look like?
Well, the conferences were once a year, and then then I got invited to participate in some of the other ecotechnic activities, which included an international traveling theater company, which literally at the end of the conference, we all got into the theater bus and drove around Europe and put on a play in a number of different cities. So I was quickly immersed in this, these eco tours. We would go and experience different cultures, and early study of culture through these theater tours was fantastic. And I learned how to memorize lines and I was a stage manager and the driver of the bus. I had an incredible time for about 3 years. We did these before, everybody got so busy that it was too hard to do that. So for about 2 months a year, there was this international tour, which ended up, I think, in London. And one of the Institute's projects is a city project in the London city biome that's called the October Gallery, and right near the British Museum. So it's a Trans Vanguard Contemporary Art Gallery, and then we just all landed there. It's also the headquarters, the UK headquarters of the Institute, which is a UK registered charity, and it's a US registered nonprofit. So I ended up getting involved in the Institute activities because there was a certain lack of information about about the activities. I started to actually create some brochures, and of course, this is long before this was back the main form of communication between the projects. And of course, Synergia Ranch back in Santa Fe, New Mexico, is where things had already started, been going on for about a decade before I sort of jumped on board. And it was a telex. I mean, we had telexes between the projects. I remember my first room, and these were communities. It originated from New Mexico as an intentional community, started in '69, and then the Institute was formed in '72 or '73. I think William Burroughs was one of the first speakers at the Desert Conference, and some other really interesting desert scientists were there. And then they went on to create these different biomic projects by first starting with the Heraclitus. And so I became a director for information for the Institute over the years, and I helped to organize the conferences. And so when I landed in London, trying to remember what happened, I think I spent a couple of years in London. Well, and then by '83, Synergetic Press suddenly became an enterprise that was up for grabs because the woman who had founded it, Kathleen Gray, was going off to full-time direct this Caravan of Dreams Performing Arts Center in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, that was being opened with Ornette Coleman, and Burroughs and Geisen were opening the theater space, and it was a performing arts center in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. That opened in 1983. So Kathleen was too occupied. I was there to help a little bit with that opening. But Synergetic Press, suddenly there were books that could be done. And that's when I actually took on the press, and I said I'd like to incorporate it, and I, gave some equity to the stakeholders, and began to start publishing books in ecology, feng shui, and then Biosphere 2 was very close, coming onto the heels of this activity in Texas. And so relatively quickly, I found myself on a path with a lifetime enterprise that has occupied me since.
It's quite a big project.
Yeah.
So backing up, for you youngins out there, telex is kind of like a precursor to fax.
Oh, now I do feel old.
Or maybe specifically a precursor for fax. And, the most amazing things I've been hearing so far is that you got the chance to rub shoulders with William Burroughs, Schultes. Do you have a chance to meet them both?
Oh, yes. Yes, over the years. Richard Evans Schultes and Dorothy, they were considered part of the family, the Biosphere family. They came out to Biosphere 2. I mean, I feel responsible for, maintaining his publishing legacy, and along with Wade and Mark Plotkin and others that have really been, working to bring his work more to fore. He's not. He's a hero to many people, but it's true. Ethnobotany still isn't, popular science.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. Like, ethnobotany is so interesting that I don't understand why it's not more popular.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, like, people watch the most horrendous TV shows all the time. And like this is something that could be super engaging. Like just a really beautiful nature show. Like Wade Davis had a series recently that I thought was very well done.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just don't understand why there's not more of them. So
hopefully
people address it.
And I've been watching this pretty closely over the years because there were very few. There were very few career opportunities in ethnobotany, and that's starting to change somewhat. That's mainly the driver. A lot of people are not going to become ethnobotanists if there's no future career path for them. But that is it is an interdisciplinary field of study. It's amazingly interdisciplinary for a specialized discipline.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that when I started publishing in 2000, the Ayahuasca Reader came to my desk with Luis Eduardo Luna, and it was the first compilation of writings and essays spanning a large period of history on different aspects of ayahuasca, which was just becoming widespread in the West, or people were beginning to learn more about it.
What year was that again?
Say again?
What year around was
it? Was in 2000.
Okay.
That we published that book. We've since done a second edition of that. And of course, we have all seen what has happened since 2000 in terms of the awareness and understanding, and various, people who've had direct experience of this diagnostic tool from the Amazon.
Right. I love how you put that, by the way.
Well, that's what it is, and it's been used for millennia. So one of the things that we've tried to do is publish bodies of knowledge that, or somebody's a life's work to really transmit understanding about something. And that's a very complex subject. And it's even more complex now, because it is now branching into not just the indigenous or individual spiritual use, but also into medicinal avenues, into Western medicine and psychology and psychotherapy. And, there's, which is a good thing. But there is this big vacuum of understanding that needs to be very, very quickly filled.
Yeah, it's pretty urgent. So how do you since you've been exposed to stuff for a bit now, are you relatively happy with where we're at with our progress on the psychedelic field, or are we maybe missing what we need to do?
I think there's some pullback in the sense of acknowledgement of the stakeholders in plant medicine, and appropriate use, appropriate recognition. I think that there's some, checkpoints being put in place rapidly, about the ethical use. There's always going to be the monetary industrial exploitation forces that are going in. So it's important that those covenants get put in place, and standards and ethical standards of use, of development of things, that there's a profit sharing, and that there's recognition of the knowledge bank and support that goes back to support that knowledge bank. So that's a more, I think that the wheels of justice do move slowly. In some cases, maybe not fast enough, but I think that we're in a period of where we've got some exponential growth in understanding that's happening, and that's going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. Are you seeing any particular groups really, really doing well around accountability and sharing of recognition, profits, all that kind of stuff?
I haven't been looking closely enough at the details. I just know that the general conversation has been really of more of the guardians types, have been really making sure that I'll give a lot of credit to the women's and psychedelics groups around, because they're like watchdogs. And there are groups, business groups, that are trying to develop different plant medicines as commodities and things. There are people that are watching these come out, and then these watchdogs are going to talk to the organizers, making sure that there are representative, not just all white male people on the panels, and that there is a broad share and representation of different voices that need to be at the discussion table as things are brought to fore. And that's a result of just this incredible ability to communicate to groups of people and networks of people that what's going on, and people are watching and making sure that no business gets there are some genuine checks, I would say, and balance being put in place by the people.
By the people, it's true.
Not by the government, by people.
Right. Yeah. Being so close after the election, I kind of want to not talk too much about government, but about what people can do. And I think it's really important that people are this active. If it was just government regulators, how could we really trust much? And I just really appreciate the attention to detail, quote unquote, the people are bringing to this project.
Yeah. ICEERS is very active in this, mostly European, South American, but they have reached, of course, MAPS is busy trying to, bridge the gaps in a way, and also deal with governments. So, but there are small many nonprofit groups that are emerging, and other like compassionate care organizations that are making sure that certain standards are kept.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and journalists and reporters and people are out there, really watchdogging this. And there's some great, outlets where people can communicate, like your blog, and other, publications that are, keeping people alerted to problem areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, our best avenue for communicating with people is on Facebook. We're working to diversify that, but it's been really great. We've got like well over 4,000 people there and pretty active conversationally, and that's been really nice because you get so many perspectives from many continents, and just people with different backgrounds coming together, because it doesn't really cost much to go on there.
I only would say one thing about the kind of recognition of where we're at as a country here, in terms of the understanding in this country, as a whole, of plant medicines. And that is, I'm from Illinois. I'm from the rural Midwest. All my family are farmers, and I there is a gulf of understanding about plant medicines and the potential of these medicines in an area, in places where people are really desperate for these kinds of tools to help with youth health and mental well-being, good well-being. So I'm interested in bridging that gulf with the work that we're doing next, because I think that part of the divide is this physical divide between suburban city and rural country, to some degree, which we've seen growing over a 50-year period of time. And then we're also in this agricultural crisis, where is a heartland where we have vast soil erosion. We have more than 50% of the men over 50, 60 years old that have been applying chemical fertilizers and herbicides to their crops have liver cancer or some kind of cancer, or are dead by 60. People have to do the math, to figure out some of these things. And there's a small movement towards more, what's called transitional agriculture. But it is conventional physical chemical agriculture all the way down in the Midwest, Illinois, Ohio, Chicago. And, I can see it on the agricultural, cultural level really clearly. But I think that part of what we saw was like, how can there be this, big gulf in understanding and the reality that we see between peoples in our country? And it's similar, I think, with, their understanding about different substances and what their values are and what their traditional uses are and what their potential for well-being can be. And so I think that's a direction I want to move in.
That's really interesting, and I really appreciate that too. So one more time, the number was 60% of men over 60 who work in agriculture, or like are the ones applying the chemicals, are?
From my shooting at the hip statistics is well over half. I mean, it's like practically every family that I know has somebody that was out there applying the fertilizer, and the herbicides. And then after, 10 years of doing that, can you imagine? Of course, and this is the round, these are now chemicals that are known and shown to produce cancer in people. And voila, there's the proof. But it's hard when you're in it to see it. It's you have to be able to step outside of the medium that you swim in. If you're if you're a goldfish in a bowl.
Right. I think that's just one of the best analogies. We use it all the time for various things, but it's, if that's your world and everybody dies at 60 or has cancer, like that's just where you're at. Yeah. There's no way to really have that introspection unless you have, another mind come in, right? That's where that whole like pseudo Einsteinian quote. I don't know if it's actually him, but you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And I think that's kind of where psychedelics can come in to help us have this kind of, Tim Leary called it intelligence squared with Robert Anton Wilson. It's part of his SMILE formula. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I got the cosmic trigger right here on my desk. Kidding. It just fell off the shelf in my lap yesterday. It is a shift in consciousness that we're talking about, which can happen in so many different ways, and how to bring that about. If you saw the Kiss the Earth film documentary, or Kiss the Soil, I think it's called Kiss the Ground. Kiss the Ground.
Who is in it? I haven't seen it yet.
It's about the regenerative agricultural movement in the United States and around the world. And these two guys that are they're rural farmers. They have been applying regenerative agricultural concept, biochar, and so leaving the soil fallow, doing different kinds of things to break out of the degradation of the soil that has such very rapid results. And he's been getting farmers in rural Midwest to do demonstrations with him. They're producing great results, and the film is about that. And so there is a way to, it's you can see the resistance as people come in to these talks that these two farmers give them about. But they show them the proof and the numbers and the economics, and they're listening. So It is possible to bend the curve. One of the other big areas of insight that I have developed because of the books that I've published has been the idea of natural capital and the concept of in terms of communicating, understanding the concept that the ecosystem services that are provided to us have an economic value that we can assign to them. It can be in dollars and cents if that's the only language that a corporate head might appreciate. But there have been in the last 10 years whole councils in Europe and around the world, set to establish these value, like the value for this river, the economic value of the Rhine River, for example, coming through, or here in the States, it would be what we have a situation of, like when we had Hurricane Katrina and the extensive damage we had along the coastline there around New Orleans, where all of the mangrove marshes had been completely removed for miles and miles and miles and miles. And then if you compare the cost damage there, where the natural buffers were removed, and the direct hits onto the infrastructure occurred, to the areas just to the north and just to the right and to the left of those of that, and where the mangroves were left intact, you see the economic damage inland is a fraction, a really much smaller fraction of the damage in there. So they can assign a money that was something like, $8 billion of damage. They assigned an economic value to mangroves.
Oh, wild.
How many miles of mangrove do you need to, avoid this much loss? And they've actually put things in place, starting to put, there are certainly countries of the world, but there are regions in America where you can see that, whole counties have really begun to do that. And you can see that they're not tearing things down. They're enhancing their natural systems. And that kind of thing is spreading, but it's not really part of our language to talk about, what is the value of that tree. Certainly not in Illinois. They cut down all the trees. And then
how can you put a value on a forest even? Like that's I was hanging out at this group, Claremont School of Theology, with John Cobb, who's like a famous philosopher. And that's like a big portion. Like we don't really have a good language for describing value or like what is the value of these things. And like discussing putting purely a financial formula on it is such like a limiting belief of like, it just like down samples. Like, sure, okay, it's just dollars. It's like, no, it's not just dollars. This is a far more complicated thing than that.
Yeah. Well, it's like interest is a function of value. If you're interested in something, then obviously you have some value for it. You can see what people value from what they put attention into.
Right.
But it's the putting the value for intellectual capital, like plant lore, assigning a value for, clear water in this stream, an economic value for that. I mean, those are just ways to help governments manage, or national, organizations to manage their resources in a way to give them leverage, to actually give them leverage to stop intrusions and things like that, to give people longer term thinking. But you have to put it in the terms of financial economics. There have been thought leaders that have really been doing this to convince corporate heads of, like Nestle's and, oil companies and things, to convince them to think longer term than 5 years, and to place some kind of value on the natural ecosystem services that they're using in their industry. And some corporations listen, and other stores, but that's a fight, I think, on the front lines for the planet, for natural right, the rights of nature, really.
Yeah. We're seeing this battle in the psychedelic world in a few places, like for instance, the 5-MeO DMT world with the Sonoran Desert toad, and Bufo alvarius, and also with peyote. I think we're seeing it with a few other rare things like iboga. I think from everything I've heard, ayahuasca is doing fairly well. I've been asking a lot of people because I, for a long time, thought it was not doing well ecologically, but happy to hear it is. And like it's definitely a problem in our psychedelic space.
A lot of the times it's because of lack of awareness, and people just don't know what the impact is their demand has on, what the consequences are from that. So
right.
that's part of it. They have some. I mean, if they really know and they're really taking the peyote, and then they're really going to probably, if they really understand that there's a scarcity, then maybe they really will do something to help support a conservation effort, and modify their consumption accordingly. I mean, it's at least these are heart-opening and mind-opening substances, so that we can become more aware, and that's what it's really all about. Is simply raising our awareness, our shifted consciousness. Ralph Metzner always loved. He said, well, we says shift of consciousness. He says you shift your consciousness every time you wake up in the morning. He says it's not that big of a deal. Just there's lots of ways to shift your consciousness, and but it's about awareness of those shifts, and what state of consciousness are you in? Oh, well, I'm quite asleep here behind the wheel. I think I better wake up.
Right. I had one of my biggest regrets so far on the podcast is not getting Ralph on the show.
Oh,
we missed him by a couple years in terms of like asking him. He was really like, I just recently started reading his books like this year, and I really upset that I didn't catch him after that. It's like, oh no, he was like one of the wisest people I've really ever encountered. And, I can say people are smart or intelligent, but this, like, his wisdom really seems to ooze. And I'm curious if you had any kind of really interactions with Ralph.
Oh, he was one of my best friends.
Oh my goodness.
He came here to Santa Fe every year and did some, gave some teachings and talks, and has a large, really team of practitioners that he worked with over the years as they co-evolved science of consciousness studies. And he was just, one of the most warmest, thoughtful of people. He was, I was just sharing a little clip from one of his talks the other day. We were talking about the word psychedelics, or using psychedelics so broadly to talk about so many things that are not psychedelic. and it's been a discussion of mine with him for many years. And he kept telling me, don't use the word psychedelics on your website. Let me just give you one word of advice. And I say, well, what am I going to say? It's going to be pathogens, entactogens, entheogens. What are we going to settle down? It's all of these things. But he he was always very careful. He was such a methodical. He was such a scientist. He was a great psychotherapist, and he was also a great facilitator, a guy, teaching people how to, observe and to understand their observations in this field. He was one of the pioneers of consciousness studies. Him. Ram Dass, Ralph Metzner, other, Stan Groff, many others that came along all together, and many I'm not saying, but he had achieved. I would describe him as a fully compassionate man. He had a fully formed heart.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, you could, and it comes through in his writings too. It's yeah.
And he had studied the way in detail. I mean, the experiments I published The Birth of a Psychedelic Culture with Ralph Metzner, Ram Dass, and their conversations about the time during 62 to 68. And I researched and helped to pull a lot of the photographs together for that book from Tim's archive, which was just being digitized by Lisa Rain and Dennis Berry. And I remember working on and John Perry Barlow wrote one of the best essays on the history of the 60s for the introduction for this book. And that's how I dove in, found out. That was the entrance into actual psychedelics. Before that, I had been very ethnobotanically oriented. But when Ralph came to me with this book of conversations, their conversations over a couple of years that had been recorded by Gary Bravo and then transcribed, really covered this transformative period of time. So I have pictures of them in 1962 at Harvard in the front of the book, and then I have pictures of them in 1968 in Haight-Ashbury at the end. And it's like all three of them, and I've got them like next, and the transformation that occurred during that period of time for not just them, but for so much of culture. It was fascinating. So, but what Ralph was always about the use of the psychedelics, and consciousness. I was impressed to find out how many notes they just sat around before it was made illegal. While the research was all still, happening. Psychotherapy. They just would get together and have experiments, and they would all take notes. They were always taking notes on each other. They were
That's
just like,
outstanding.
oh, and how exactly did that, did you experience that, epiphany and all, they would take detailed notes about this science. And that was what impressed me so much.
Right. Like where else in spirituality, like currently is this kind of thing being done? And it's like pretty rare, like to be this kind of like critical, inquisitive, compassionate.
I would say now it's become literally. He started CIIS. Ralph did, along with a few others, and they've been putting out now doctorate degree or whole degrees in psychedelic psychotherapy. So it's like he helped to develop the manual and this whole discipline now that. As the medicines are becoming available, you need to have the people that are trained to be able to administer them.
Do you offhand know if Ralph was involved in the that first Tim Leary Ram Dass book that was like the Tibetan Book of the Dead?
Yes, absolutely.
Ralph was involved in that.
Yes, Ralph went after they left Harvard to Millbrook. He was the undergraduate that he was with them. They were the three people that were, and then Peggy Hitchcock was there too with them, and Maria Mangini, I think, was there when she was a young woman back in those early days. And so we had this great event at City Lights Bookstore in 2009 when we published Birth of a Psychedelic Culture, and we had Peggy Hitchcock, John Perry Barlow, Ralph Metzner, Gary Bravo. We packed it out. John Perry Barlow. In the early days of Facebook, John Perry was already an icon. And an hour before the City Lights bookstore event, he sent out to his list, oh, by the way, I'm speaking at City Lights in an hour. And we had standing room only. We had people lining outside City Lights, standing on each other's shoulders, looking in the windows, trying to see what was going on inside. It was one of the biggest events. It was so cool.
Yeah, and people, I'm also guilty of this, don't know enough about John Perry Barlow. He seems like one of the more magical figures in the space too. He got some credit recently when he died, but not enough really.
Well, just consider him one of the pillars of people that have been defending our civil liberties and our rights to freedom on the internet for the last, how many years have we had it now? 30, 25?
Something like that. Yep.
30 years. Co-founder of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which continues to fight to this day very, very hard, and they've grown quite a bit to, survey, rights to privacy in particular, defending, going to court to defend our civil liberties. So, he was a real patriot. There's a great biography out on him, autobiography, I think, that came out last year. But I've forgotten the title of it. But if you just Google John Perry Barlow, he had one of the greatest senses of humor. And he was just a wonderful writer, great speaker. He wrote lyrics for the Grateful Dead. Of course, he was hanging out with the Grateful Dead because he was John Perry Barlow and part of the Grateful Dead family. And, he was a Republican until I think shortly after Clinton. And then, worked to be that man, that voice of freedom in the Republican ranks for many years. And because he's also a rancher from Wyoming, so hardworking Wyoming rancher, very large ranch. So he was a cyber cowboy. He hung out with Tim Leary in the early days. I met him at Tim Leary's house. That was back when they were doing the cyberpunk days, cyberspace, the cyberspace stuff. The whole digital be-ins were happening. That would have been
when Tim was probably making those video games and whatnot.
Yeah. So he and Tim were buddies, always hanging out. And John, my partner, John Allen, was buddy with Tim and John Perry. Both of them. John Perry's daughter is actually staying here visiting with us for a little while.
Oh, wow.
We really venerate the work that he's done, and Electronic Frontier Foundation continues on. John Gilmore was his co-founder of that with one other person of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And then, of course, John is the chairman of MAPS, and John Perry was very much involved in what was happening with the whole MAPS evolution as well.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that John Perry Barlow is the reason that MAPS doesn't really spend too much on Facebook ads. Speculation. I've heard rumors, but it's. I think there's some EFF crossover there.
Yes, and rightly so. And I think that because of the work that they do, I think that they are right to do the diligence that they have in their information systems. Mm-hmm. And it's good that they have that knowledge too, because actually I'm far more, naive about what's really going on. And I choose to be so to a certain degree, but I do know that there's genuine reasons for being cautious about how we set up our information infrastructures, especially communicating in this field.
Yes. Yeah. I started I did kind of a false start on a segment I want to do weekly, like Joe's Paranoia Update. Just kind of like throwing out, like what are the latest developments in kind of the tech world, and how can that impact us from a law enforcement point of view, and much more. Like it's one thing to like not get arrested 30 days from now, but it is another thing if they're able to build a case on us over the course of 5 years.
Well, I think our information freedoms are largely due to a lot of the policing that Electronic Frontier Foundation has done for us.
Absolutely.
The internet. And in the field of publishing that we're in, we just have to be. We're not recommending, advocating, or anything. We are simply trying to provide the best knowledge on a subject to our readers to inform.
Yeah.
And we've got good. There are other centers of information on the internet that are not nearly as having strict editorial policies as ours, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely. I am curious. So we're going to wrap in about 10, 15 minutes. But I was kind of curious if there's anything like we haven't really dug into yet that you'd like to get into before we kind of talk about your upcoming titles?
Well, I guess I would say to anybody that's interested in learning a little bit more about the ecotechnics approach to a project, the discipline of relating the technosphere to the biosphere. That's kind of a fundamental dynamic force that we have right now on the planet. There's this film documentary that just came out this year called Spaceship Earth, and it's streaming on many platforms, I think Amazon, iTunes, Hulu, and it will, for those people that want to dive a little bit deeper, to suggest looking at that to see how the Heraclitus was built. There's some footage of the Heraclitus in the Amazon. There's, how people were able to work together and do something over a 50-year period of time is something of a story in itself. And I think that film captured a lot of that spirit that helped these far-flung enterprises to be able to do such things as spawn publishing companies like Synergetic Press, projects like Biosphere 2. And I would like to, be available if there's people that are, just, I think as a source of inspiration, it's a good story. And then our Institute of Ecotechnics does have projects. We do have other ways to get involved. They can go to our website, and we'll put a link, I think, in here on your podcast to that.
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so far we've talked about Kiss the Soil, which Woody Harrelson was the name I was going
That's
for.
Right.
I was like, I think his dad was a contract killer or something, because I think that's why he got his initial roles. And what was that?
Woody Harrelson was actually one of the stars that came to perform at our closure event at Biosphere 2, the night that the Biosphereans went inside. We called it the closure event. The media were so confused. Oh, Biosphere 2 is closed already. Yeah, that's what we closed them in now. Now the experiment has started.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, he's a really interesting character. I'm glad he's on the side of the planet. It's very helpful to know. It's a strange thing. So you're kind of a basic citizen, not really knowing anybody who's famous, and then you're like, oh, who can I rely on? Like having these kind of touchstones for people with integrity. It's like it's really hard to figure out who those folks are and to find your path forward. I've always erred on the side of going super radical and then queuing back a little bit to what I find rational, but it's a complicated path.
It is. You have to learn the art of following your nose. And really to be, when I talk about awareness being a really important thing to kind of pay attention to, because we very often get, like into this, sleepwalking state. But awareness, it's a dangerous universe. And just to remember something about, just to put sensation into anything like your fingertips or your nose, the tip of your nose. And so if you have some, you want to follow your nose, but you want to have some sense of awareness as you are. And then that can take you down some very interesting paths. The other thing that's really important is in doing anything, it's very hard to do anything by yourself. You need to find a group of other individuals that have some commonality, or ally yourself with other organized groups already, to get something of a coalescence of wills to make something happen. And it's not the one and only thing. Have a diversity. The other thing I learned is that it's really important to have a diversity of, well, if you can have a diversity of enterprise, certainly a diversity of interest, because, and certainly if you're living in a collective and working with other people, it's a lot of varied interests. So, we try to work with 3 lines of work. We have ecology, we have art, and then we have individuality. So working, some individual line of work, working with others, and then something for the planet. If you can get 3, it's like the concept of synergy. With 3 elements, you have more stability than you'd have with 2. Synergetics is a very important line of thinking that Buckminster Fuller developed. And that was even well in the 50s and 60s. And that line of understanding is sort of the third leg of our stool in the publishing company. We have biospherics, we have psychedelics, and synergetics, which is really now, more like developing our community collaborative platforms, and some of the events that we'll do to, how do we communicate the ideas that are in our books, bring bring the discussion to a community level, and so you get a lot of stability with diversity. And I think it's an important thing that maybe today in our world of gross specialization or hyper specialization,
Yeah.
our educational system is designed to specialize you. Let's not forget the way before was actually a much more jack of all trades and the master of at least one kind of way of being. And I think it's helpful for people to have be able to know that, and that as we evolve our social, our society around, and hopefully towards as Claudio Naranjo hopes to see, a post-patriarchal society where there is, more of a common capability of taking care of all life existing without any damage to any one particular species or another. And those are some of the goals aspired by Buckminster Fuller and our group, the Institute, and the books that we publish also aspire to help show a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So let's dig into what's coming up. I know the Vinanda Shiva book just came out, and you did a Claudio book recently?
We did Claudio Naranjo's last book that he wrote, which really talks about how to grow your awareness, how to, and how our educational system could improve on looking at teaching things like love, and how he would like to see humanity learn to love itself more, and talking about spiritual growth, his philosophical take on the world. He did a lot of work with the Enneagram as well, so he goes into some of that. It's a different kind of Claudio Naranjo book, one that our young readers are particularly moved by, and I know I've been reading it, and I am too.
I've had it on my desk since I received the copy and have not read it. I am inspired to really dig into Claudio in a big way and kind of expand how many people know about him.
Yeah, and he was both a great psychotherapist. He was a school leader. He was a teacher. He has a foundation, the Naranjo Foundation, and he did work a lot with Stan Grof and others in California for a while. But he was a blend of. I mean, he studied Sufism. He had a number of different traditions that he built upon and created a beautiful spiritual teaching and community of people working towards evolving higher consciousness and awareness. And he's a beautiful soul. And many of our shoulders on which we stand are we're losing them. So I feel more necessity, you might say, to capture these voices.
Yes, it is a necessity. It is like the fact that Kyle and I have not got Stan Grof on the show before he had a stroke is like a really big deal to me. Like it's up there with Ralph, but even more so because Stan's kind of our foundation. And yeah, these people are going and they're going quick, and we've got to really cherish them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you're doing the right thing. I mean, cultural oral history is a big thing now, and that's the way to do it. I mean, you're getting it through storytelling, and that's what the Heraclitus is really doing now, is being rebuilt. And when it goes back into the water in another year or so, we'll continue to go to these remote coastal areas and back to the Amazon River, and we're doing cultural oral history documentation of sea people and coastal cultures. And they're all going into a database. United Nations started an initiative a few years ago. So now that we have such incredible tools to be able to use them in this way, in constructive ways, is really powerful. I don't know. Did you see the social dilemma that?
Oh, not yet. This is like where my paranoid nature kind of like stems from. This is like all the stuff I've been
Well, we can have
simmering on for a long time.
another discussion about those levels, of consciousness. Really, I mean, I mention it because it was at the heart of it showed at the heart of our awareness capabilities as a human species, and what can be manipulated and what can't, and what can we do if we're really awake, and what happens to us when we're asleep.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big deal. So it's like making this unconscious part of us conscious, and and understanding that there's a lot out there in the world that we're not conscious of yet. That's a big deal. And that's a psychedelic thought, I believe. How do we expand our awareness, our consciousness, such that we keep learning, and we kind of draw these lines that, make us want to be this interdisciplinary person. That's kind of my consistent hope. Like more people interested in more things and active in more things.
So it's like after 30 years of publishing books in these areas, and don't get me wrong, it's not like the environmental books are flying off the shelf, the ones about how to save the planet. No, the ones about the substances and the psychedelics and all that, those are really, that's the cash cow, the gravy. The ones on, how to survive and, not totally destroy trash the planet out, are still edging along. But I will feel that I have had an impact because there's this whole thing about preaching to the choir. We have such a great community now, a really large, growing, fantastic community of people that are, looking to find the right ways and the paths, and on working on self-development and compassionate care, and more caregivers and more researchers and things like that. But I think that my litmus test is going to be when I can get my family relatives in the farm country of Illinois to be open to a discussion about things like medical cannabis, even CBD. They have one of the highest opioid epidemic crises anywhere on the country out there in Illinois. And it's difficult to get, I don't know that the healthcare offers a broad range of options. But, it's a tough job for anybody to try to overcome that addiction epidemic that we have. But it's very, 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 very hard in the Midwest. And I'd like to see a way, that we'll be able to find means of communication to reach those minds.
Yeah. I don't know how to exactly feel about it, but this idea that celebrities will come around and like help swing opinion is interesting, though I think it's possible to manipulate public perception that way too. So like for one, Gwyneth Paltrow had an episode on mushrooms in Jamaica that was, I give it a C on a grade scale. And then I haven't watched this yet, but Zac Efron is like kind of grew up in the Disney World kind of TV situation. He had a series recently because he's sick of Hollywood, where he just kind of was exploring different things around the world, and ayahuasca came up there too. So two major celebrities talking about psychedelics and TV shows. Like I think unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, I don't know, like that's how a lot of this awakening will come. People will be interested and jump in. I just hope they decide to dig deeper, read books by Don Lattin and many others.
Yeah, it's the reading of the book part. So I'm going to work on the audiobooks next. As you know, I think that's maybe one way to kind of get the message into that community, because there's not a lot of reading going on. I gave my mother some of my books. I said, "Hey, Mom, where's your library? I wanted to put some of the books away that were on the coffee table." And she said, "Downtown."
That's wild. So she just got rid of everything?
No, she didn't get rid of it. It's just I asked her where in her house her library was. And it was like,
got it.
This thought was not like, I'm sorry, I forgot where I was.
That's funny. Wow.
I mean, I come from literally, I am born in Normal, Illinois, and I am definitely a round peg, that did not fit in a square hole there. At the same time, I have a deep love of it and a deep love of my family and the soil that I came from.
Mm.
And I don't want all that soil to run downstream. One day, I have different large scale kind of land projects that I'm involved with. So I like to the project that we have in Australia that I'm in the process of bringing in a new venture is about 4,000 acres of pastoral regenerative agricultural demonstration property up in the Kimberley. And it looks like we're going to get some really interesting new energy and organic fertilizer experiments and a whole, exactly what I had dreamed might be possible there 40 years ago when I first started getting involved with it. It's like they've just appeared on the front doorstep, and it's maybe going to happen where, we can actually apply on a large scale a demonstration of the effects of biochar and regenerative agriculture in restorative agriculture in an area that has been largely degraded over the last 50, 70 years. Through overgrazing. So those are the other kind. I like to see things happen where it's going to impact scale.
Mm. Have you been in touch at all with Albert Bates, the kind of biochar guy?
Yeah, and he through friends. I'm going to meet him eventually.
Great. Yeah, I got to spend a night at his farm in Tennessee once called The Farm. It's really, really an interesting spot.
The farm, it's huge. That's how I know I've heard of it. They were at the psychedelic conference.
Mm.
The guys from the farm were at the psychedelic conference in Arizona. They had the table. Two of the people that still live at the farm, and it wasn't Alan Bates, but
I wish I bumped into them. I had a beautiful time there. Albert gave me an amazing tour. A podcaster that I love called KMO was living there at the time, and got to smoke some pot in Tennessee, which I don't think is legal. So that was fun. Beautiful time. Yeah. Sorry, feds. Sorry.
I want to make it there. There's when we can travel around a little bit more, obviously everybody's going to want to go everywhere.
Yeah.
I'll be in. You got a spare room? I'll come and visit.
I do. Yeah. This my town, it's we're in like crisis virus levels now. Like can't go outside without a mask on kind of stuff. And it's we had the whole downtown core. I'm in a big tourist town. So it's like really scary to see how many people have been coming here all summer. It was very crowded all summer. Wow. More so than I think is okay.
Well, stay safe. It's starting to snow here now. I see it's come down a little bit now during the time that we've been talking. The snow has come from your place to ours.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I hope it doesn't stay too long for you. I think the soil would like it, but I don't know how much people like it down there.
Well, just briefly, I'd like to tell you about what's happening next year because we have been growing with the publishing and particularly in the psychedelics book space when we started to work with co-publishing with Transform Press. That's the Shulgin's publishing company. And in May of next year, we have a really big event together that will be a 2-day symposium hosted at City Lights Bookstore. We're going to have some fantastic lineup to launch the volume 1 of Sasha Shulgin's course curriculum, the course that he taught at San Francisco State College.
Oh my goodness.
It's on the nature of drugs, and it is it's been transcribed, edited, and it has some introductory material. It'll have some interesting stories.
Non-chemists will be able to deal with it?
Pardon me?
Will non-chemists be able to follow?
It is, let me say, what basically it's going to be talking about is history. So there'll be about the first volume covers his lectures. They're transcribed lectures, essentially. So he goes, the first part of the course is about the history of pharmacology. Then he goes into specific drugs, the second part of the first volume. And then the third part is about discussing social impacts. So you're really reading what Sasha said. And it's historically significant. These courses were given during the 80s. So obviously we're keeping them intact. But there's still so much knowledge that's transmitted in these lectures, even though there may be some, things that we know more about today than he knew about then. we feel that it is really transmitting it's going to be 3 volumes all up
That's
of
amazing.
publications. We really feel that this is an essential part of the legacy publishing of Shulgin's work. And then we also have a book of letters that is coming out, edited, that Anne has been putting together.
Wow. That's amazing.
Eventually, there's more material, but Wendy Tucker, who is Anne's daughter and Sasha's stepdaughter, has been running the publishing company for about 30 years herself, and we're really having a great time working together, developing the materials that she's been, just valiantly preserving and transcribing and developing over the years. There's Keeper Trout has been one of the in-house editors that's been working a lot. I don't know if you've heard his name, but
only from Jasmine. I would love to get him on the show.
Yeah, he's awesome, and he's one of the contributors to the ethnopharmacologic book.
Great. Yeah, his you just Google that name and he comes up a lot. I feel bad saying Google now, so you DuckDuckGo that, and he has a lot of work under his name.
He is so knowledgeable, and we're just really thrilled to be able to combine our resources together with Transform Press and bring out these works. And there's more stuff to come too out of the Shulgin archive in the years ahead. So, but we will keep you informed when the event takes place. It'll be May 15th and 16th. We'll be promoting it online a month and a half ahead of time, and we're sure to have some fantastic conversations over the course of that 2-day seminar.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got that, and we've got Kyle Ortega's book coming out on psychedelic integration. That is really a fantastic a guide for clinicians.
Kind of a workbook, or
it's definitely, if it would be both for individuals that would like to have something for themselves, as well as practitioners, clinical practitioners, psychotherapists.
Good.
You'll find out more about that. But he is one of the, really creative, highly skilled, younger generation of psychotherapists emerging in this field with some really great tools to share.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Is that it for psychedelic books coming out?
That I can think of.
Cool.
Well, no, cool. We are going to do, we have the Shaman's Pharmacy coming out with Chris Killam.
Oh, great.
In another year later. And we'll let you know in advance of these other books coming out. But we also have the Mind of Plants book, which is going to come out in another year. That's an anthology of writings from 3 very interesting scientists that have put that together. The Mind of Plants. That's going to be a really interesting collection.
Well, I'm excited about all of these. This is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of Synergetic Press.
I'm excited about all of these too. And I have to say, Doug Reel, who's our managing director and associate publisher, has just been brilliant in directing and bringing in a lot of our exciting new titles. And we've just expanded our staff. We have another team member that's coming on to join us to help us to really reach out and promote the books. And we have a very ambitious publishing program ahead in the year ahead. So stay tuned.
Right. Yeah. I think, please do stay tuned, everybody. It's really exciting. It's, were you only doing like one book a year for a while or so? And now you're able to really go a lot quicker.
Yeah, we're doing about 5 to 6 books very shortly. We're up to, I think we did 3 or 4 this year. We are moving very, very rapidly. We'd like to be able to get eventually up to 1 book a month. There certainly is enough material. A lot of people are sending in some very interesting work, and we're taking time to consider everything. And it's fantastic to have such a range of high level material being produced by people around the world.
Yeah. Well, this is fantastic, Deborah. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope everybody checks out what you've got going at Synergetic Press and follows you on social media. Even there's a lot of really great stuff you post.
Thank you. We try to, keep it is quality, not quantity, that we're interested in, and keeping the conversation going.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come on, and I enjoyed our conversation very much.
Yeah, and I hope we can do a part 2 at some point.
We're going to be here.
And there you have it, Deb Snyder of Synergetic Press. I hope you liked that one. Let us know what you think over at psychedelicstoday@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. Would love to hear from you there. And again, if you want to support us, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/psychedelicstoday. If you join up there, you get access to our member-only Discord channel, and there's a bunch of other extras as well. You also get early access to some episodes and access to our community here and there. So check that out. Also share episodes with your friends. If there's any awesome episodes that you really love, share that around. And we'd also love to see you in classes. So come check out our education offerings over at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. You can learn about Carl Jung and psychedelics and the shadow. We've got Navigating Psychedelics, of course, over there, and a bunch of other stuff too. So come on down, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. Check out our website and some of our latest blogs at psychedelicstoday.com. And I think that's it for now. This is Joe Moore signing off. We'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.